Okay, hello everyone. This is Ali Azzeddin from 4th Generation for Education. This is our special day. We are all special or Inclusion Day. This is session number 6. We had a 3-morning session in Arabic and now we have our session in English. Feel free to introduce who you are via the chat, where you are attending from. So Dianne, we have people watching from Pakistan, Thailand, Lebanon, UAE, and many other places around this planet. I'm so happy to be with you this afternoon. People are joining from Rome, from India, from Italy, Turkey, and I'm also checking the Facebook. So if you look at me looking down and up, that's mean I'm also here on Facebook watching and checking all the messages coming and all the questions. 2 small tips in the chat. Choose all panelists and attendees if you want everyone to read your messages. And if you have any question in the Q&A, we are ready to give it a start, Dianne. I'm so excited to collaborate with you.
Okay, hi Ali and hi everybody. It's lovely to see such diversity in our participants today. I'm looking forward to sharing universal design for learning and thinking about this as an approach for inclusive practice. We're going to be looking at ways that we can do this in the online environment and the blended environment as well. So hopefully we'll have time to have a little tour of a hyperdoc and become more familiar with how we can use this as inclusive practice. So Ali, are you good for me to start? Is everyone here, do you think?
Yes, everyone is here and we are ready to give it a start. And let's say hello to all our familiar faces and our friends who are attending as well.
Yes. Hello, everyone that I haven't seen for some time face to face. I'm sure I've seen you down the lens though recently. So it's lovely to have you joining us. Thank you so much for being here today.
So what did you prepare for us, Dianne? What's on the agenda?
Okay, so we're going to look at universal design for learning, and we're going to look at how we can include this in our classroom practice, find out a little bit more about what universal design for learning is, but also think about how we can approach this for our online classrooms and how we can include more learners, include that 180 degree of a classroom rather than just looking at the smaller average. So that's going to be part of the principles that we're going to look at today. And also think about some of the barriers that we might have in our virtual classrooms or our physical classrooms, and think about maybe working a little bit smart to be able to remove those barriers and to engage our learners.
Good, good.
Okay, are you ready for me to start, everyone? Shall I start now? Okay, so just welcome, as we've already said. I can see that we've got people from around the world. It's so exciting to be working with you today and to see you attending. I'm looking forward to your questions as well. So please do think of the questions that come to mind as we go through the presentation. And Ali will help me share those questions with you and hopefully come up with responses for you. But also I'm going to have some questions for you as well. Because what I really would like you to do is think about what we're talking about today and how that might impact your own learning environment. Think about your own context and perhaps then respond with questions and thoughts there. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm not going to talk about me for very much at all. I'm a lead educator with the IB. So like Ali, I've been working with the IB for many years. But I've now progressed as a consultant, an educational consultant, working in lots of different environments. Ali and I were just talking before we started, and we're like jugglers. We have many educational balls in the air at the moment. I work with inquiry-based learning, inclusion. I specialise in arts, and I work with NYP communities in different geographical locations as well. So I'm very blessed to have a very exciting life working in education, and I feel very privileged to do that. One of my passions is inclusion, and universal design for learning, when I first discovered this, became very much something that I wanted to pursue and learn more about, because I do feel that it's something that anyone in any educational environment can use to support all learners, not just the learners that we might identify initially as those who have inclusive needs. Okay, I'm sharing on screen with you some seminar dates. I'm working on some seminars that are going to be quite short seminars, 3 hours or 6 hours. I can pop these in the chat towards the end of the webinar, and you'll be able to have a look at those and see if that's something that you would like to perhaps visit if you want to find out some more about what I'm doing. Okay. So this is an introduction to Universal Design for Learning, and we're going to think about the student-faced journey and the barriers that they have to learning, and we will also explore strategies and tools to engage our learners and to help to remove those barriers. We will understand the UDL approach to teaching and learning, consider variability of the learner and the barriers that exist, discuss strategies to engage learners, and then consider further questions that arise at the end, because as we're all inquiry learners, we all constantly have more and more questions that we want to ask. Okay, so Universal Design for Learning all started with a guy called Ron Mace, who could not understand why it was so difficult for him to access different types of buildings. It was something that he looked at and thought, well, why don't we have access for all equally? So he looked at architecture as a way of approaching the design of buildings and creating things like ramps, which would allow all people to access that building. So thinking about the type of people who could access a building using a ramp, what he considered was, if I'm carrying some shopping and I've been out, I'll be able to walk up using my shopping. If I'm a mum with a stroller, I'll be able to access that building. And so he continued to think about ways all of the people could access that particular building. And that was how Universal Design for Learning started, because he applied those principles from architecture to the learning environment. And that's the very, very ground roots of where it came from. So I'm going to show you a video now. Shelley Moore is a great advocate for inclusive education. Quite recently, I know that she spoke at the IB conference, so you may be familiar with her. I would encourage you, if you are interested in this particular aspect of inclusive practice, to go onto YouTube and look for Shelley Moore, because she's got some amazing videos that give great insight into some of the different practices which can support our learners.
Hi, my name is Shelley Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregates students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be, philosophically, versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we could have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay, because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end, and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split, and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to, the kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with universal design for learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
Okay,
this
everyone.
is very inspiring, Dianne.
Isn't it? Isn't it? And I think Shelley puts it so well, and I can see that a couple of people have said, what a great analogy. If we
And then
think,
I'm happy because during the day today, I had session for the gifted and talented, and I have a session for student with difficulties. So I'm looking at the whole spectrum.
yeah. And when we think about our classrooms, Ali, I mean, I work mostly now with educators. And if I have a classroom full of educators, I can guarantee that a universal design for learning approach will reach more of those educators. And I always like to think of, if we've got 180 degrees, what we generally will work towards is perhaps this mythical average that's in the middle. And really, the mythical average is 0 because none of us are truly average. So when we think about universal design for learning, as Shelley has said, if we think about aiming for the most difficult pins, but providing those opportunities for everyone in our classroom, you will find that your learners will connect, and they will connect with the ways that inspire them, the ways that interest them, and you will see that everyone will have a greater opportunity to engage with the learning. And what's great about it is we're not creating lots of differentiated strategies. How much work is that? How much work do we do as educators to prepare for different students? If we can use these strategies to approach our learners and provide an open recipe, an open book for them to choose from, we'll find that more learners will engage. And we'll find that the learners that we perhaps didn't think that we needed to create different strategies from will actually choose ones that they prefer to use. Okay, so that's developing a little bit more of what Shelley has said, but her analogy is spot on. So I'm so happy that resonated with you. So let's think about, what is it in a nutshell? So it's not just designing instruction for that average student. We're seeking to provide all students with equal learning opportunities. Now, what does that mean for the learners that are in our classroom? What it means is that we're not segregating our students. We're not pulling our students out of the classroom. We're actually working with all learners. So we have this completely honest, inclusive practice. We'll present learning and content in a variety of ways, just through simple strategies. And it will allow for students to have multiple ways to demonstrate their learning. So they will have agency, which is so important, and they will be able to have choice. And what we can also do is we can anticipate some of the barriers by considering the variabilities of our learners. We can consider the barriers that may be in our environment. And they're not barriers that the learner has, but they're barriers that happen in the learning environment. And it might be physical barriers. It might be barriers that we have in our online environment. There may be barriers that are there. So considering these and how we can remove these will allow students to connect with the learning. So I'd like to ask you for a moment just to gather your thoughts. What do you think your school's needs are regarding how we can bring more learners into inclusive practice? What about your students? What are your students' needs? What would they say? It's important that they have a voice, and we don't make choice always for our students, but we invite our students into the conversation. And finally, this triangulation is our parents. parents are also part, and I think even more so when we have this remote learning that we're going through at the moment, which many of us never planned for. How are our parents able to engage with the conversation as well? So I'm going to ask you to take a moment to just gather your thoughts. And as I said, everything that we're talking about, connect to your own context and maybe take a moment just to think and maybe make some notes. I'll leave you for a moment just to do that.
And then you can share these ideas in the chat, and then I will be reading them aloud. So why should we change what we are currently doing? Think about your schools, think about your students, and think about your parents. And we are waiting for your feedbacks. And this is again a message for the people watching us on Facebook. We have a few people watching there, and they already started interacting and commenting. So I'm getting an amazing message on Facebook. But so what would you like to change, or what are the needs of your school, your student, and your parents? Please feel free to share with us some of your ideas. So to hear your voices and to allow for this interaction before we continue. They are quiet, but usually they are quiet at the beginning, and then suddenly I have all the messages coming,
Yeah,
especially if they are writing long sentences.
It's okay. I think it's important to take a moment to pause and to think, though, and reflect, for sure.
Okay. So the answer started, Dianne. We will take a look at the bigger picture. So take a look at about the bigger picture. Adapt to change. Oof. This is now fast. Flexibility to accept the change. Parents need education and acceptance. Parents need differentiations as well. And they need to know how does it look like. Creating opportunities for UDL in the classroom. We need a learning support program. We don't have this in our school at the moment. Students need more authentic learning experiences. We have to change what we are doing because everything around us is changing. Students are different. Method of learning are different. So hello, Raja from Facebook. The world is changing, so we need to change. Like it seems like they've read the same message, but one is coming on Zoom and one is coming on Facebook. We are thinking in the same way. Again, this is another one. Parents need awareness on differentiation, and then create opportunities for agency. I will take a few more visual learning experiences, more time for planning, using the design of learning. And then I'm going to take the final one from Facebook. The student needs are basically a quality education that caters to their needs.
Yeah. So change is a big
key
concept,
message.
That's going right the way through that. And I mean, my goodness, how much change have we been through in the last year? I mean, if anyone had said to me, Ali, I'm sure you feel the same. We're going to just suddenly do all of this change in a very quick way. We would have probably gone, okay, no, and run in the opposite direction. But that's not what we do. We meet these challenges, but change is can be a very frightening prospect. And what I would suggest you do, and I think I'm going to finish with this today as well, but I'm going to say it right now, is if we can just change a small thing in the way that we are working with our students, and think about collecting together some tools that we will start to use. And you very slowly are filling up your toolbox with your different ideas of how you can meet the variability of those learners and the strategies that you can use. Over time, that becomes part and parcel of our teaching and our learning, of everything that we're doing with our students. So just thinking about taking that moment to take that first step, take that risk, be a risk taker. Once you've done that, the next step becomes much easier. So that would be my advice. Yes, we have to change what we're doing. But also I noticed there that parents came up. I do think that parents understanding what we are doing as educators is incredibly important. They're part of the whole equation, aren't they? But quite often, how our students are learning and what we're trying to do to reach all of our learners and have inclusive practice, parents will not have had any experience of. So ensuring that they are aware of what's happening and what we're trying to achieve, and getting them on board is actually really key to success, I think. Okay. Are there any more points there, Ali, that we should
I got many, so but I prefer to continue because to make sure that we are on time.
I think so. I think so, because
Yeah.
there's a lot to talk about. So thank you for your thoughts and responses there. So let's just think about some of those little changes. If we think about traditional versus UDL. So in the traditional classroom, teaching focuses on what is taught. Inclusive classroom is for, and this is a big one, it's for specific students. But how about thinking of that in a different way? The teacher decides how the material is taught. The classroom has a fixed setup. And I'm sure this is resonating with some of us. This may have been our traditional classrooms as we were growing up. This might be what we experienced when we were children. And grades are used to measure performance. Yeah, so that's that quantifiable grade at the end. Okay, so what about in the UDL classroom? How might some of those subtle changes come in? So if we think about teaching focuses on both what is taught, but how it's taught, the ways we are meeting our learners, and it's our approach to those learners. Inclusive classroom, now this is my big one. The inclusive classroom is for all students. It's not for specific students. Our classrooms are inclusive. Everybody has, I mean, if we think about our online learning environment now, if you are a student who has moved from a physical classroom to a virtual classroom, you may now have different barriers that you're experiencing. You may have experienced no barriers in your physical classroom, but now in your virtual one, you may find that you have some barriers that are stopping you from really engaging with that learning, or vice versa. Those students who were experiencing barriers in a physical classroom may now not experience those because they have their own environment which they are more comfortable in, for example. So there's lots of things that we can think about in the environment and the barriers that students have, and how we can embrace all of those learners and make the classroom inclusive for all. We need to think about the teacher and the student, and deciding how the student will learn the material. So it's not the teacher that's deciding, the student has agency. And again, that's something that I believe very passionately about, that students should have an ability to be able to choose what speaks to them. And finally, there are multiple ways to complete an assignment. So allowing for students to have choice is very important. Okay, so moving forward, it's especially helpful with Universal Design for Learning for students who have learning and attention issues. It does help with it because the information will adapt to the learner instead of making the learner try to adapt to the material. How wrong is that when we think about that? It allows for multiple ways to interact with the material, which I've touched on before, but allowing for flexibility that provides opportunity to work to strengths and also to support those areas that need extra work. This is a real big one for me as well. When we talk about inclusive classrooms, if all of our learners are together in the classroom, and if we have the benefit of having support networks within our school, those specialists who support our students, if they're actually part of the classroom and working with all of the students in the classroom, what happens is we reduce the stigma, because students who are pulled from a classroom constantly will quite often feel very much like they are isolated or that they are different when they want to be part of that classroom. But again, this is where student agency really comes into play, and having the conversation with the student and triangulating it with the teacher and the parent to understand what that student would like. How would that student like to work? So we see diversity as a strength. We are all different. Think about some of the people who have become great entrepreneurs in our world, people who have perhaps not conformed to the norm, the traditional sort of educational model. Those people who have perhaps flunked out of school quite early, but then gone on to have great success. Those are the kind of learners that Universal Design for Learning will also encourage and embrace. It allows for creativity, inclusiveness, flexibility, and all of those other areas that we can see there. When we think about the variability of our learners, it's really quite immense. So does the curriculum meet the needs of all of our learners? The UDL framework has all of the components that we need for, I mean, we're into the 21st century so far in now, it is where we are, it's our current learning. But it's a framework that's based on cognitive neuroscience. It's designed for a wide spectrum of learners. It's our language students. Think about all of those language students who, if they could choose the way that they meet the learning and have variety of ways of doing that, that would enable them to reach further, perhaps. Our gifted and talented. Quite often I will work with schools and we look at the inclusive needs of a school. And it's just at one side of that bowling lane. It's not all of the students. It's not the students who perhaps have special areas that they seem to exceed in. They get left to one side quite often. So this allows for all students to be considered and to be catered for. So, do we need to make a pause now before I go on to this next part? Are there any comments that we need to share, Ali?
We're okay. We're okay.
We're okay. Okay.
I'm getting a lot of thank you even in the Q&A section.
Okay, that's great. So, right, everybody, on the screen you can see a Rubik's Cube. We're all quite familiar with this Rubik's Cube. I have never been able to solve this. I have such a short attention span.
Same for me.
I never tried. No, and I'm not the sort of person now, even though we can do it, I will go and watch YouTube and follow somebody, even though I know I'm a very visual learner. I learn by seeing. It's just not my thing. But what I want you to think of is what type of learners could engage with that. When we think about our learners, what type of learners could engage with that? It has, how do we know how to solve this Rubik's Cube? What faces does it have? What are we looking for on here? We're looking to match color, aren't we? So immediately we're speaking to those learners who might engage with color. Okay, so moving forward. What about this one? So here we've got a Rubik's Cube that has Braille on the surface. Oof. So those learners who are extremely skilled and can read Braille with their hands can solve this Rubik's Cube. So now we've got two Rubik's Cubes. We've got one for those who can see the colours and one for those who can read Braille well, but perhaps can't see the colours. So we have two different Rubik's Cubes. So how about we think about changing it up a little bit? So we start to bring in more features, but in the same cube. So now we're starting to think about what can we do in Universal Design for Learning to reach those learners? What does Universal Design for Learning look like? And we're starting to think about that through a Rubik's Cube. And there's some more things that we could add on. How about if we start to add some light and some sound? How powerful would that be as a tool to be able to work a Rubik's Cube? I'm going to choose to listen to the sounds, to solve my puzzle. I'm going to choose because I prefer to feel my way around this Rubik's Cube. I'm going to choose to engage with the textiles, with the colors, with the lights. There's lights on this one. So that's how we start to think about how we can approach universal design for learning and how we can approach our way that we interact with our students. Thoughts on that?
It's so powerful. Yeah, I think we need
Thoughts on that?
a moment of like, oof, what if I'm looking at all my learning experiences and then I'm adding extra layers? So instead of targeting only the people who are able to see the colors, I can target more people, and then I can allow them to succeed as well.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
But what we're doing when I talked about those inclusive classrooms is we're giving every student in that classroom the same Rubik's Cube. And if you use that as the analogy for the learning engagements, the way we're approaching, then that's how we're starting to think about UDL. Okay.
I'm getting some messages here, and so yes, feel free to share your reflection. Dominga is saying that looking into and practicing multiple intelligences in the classroom according to their needs. Interesting analogy between what you just shared with us now, and then so these are some of the feedbacks.
Yeah. So multisensory as well. Yeah, if we think about that as a way of approaching it in the classroom. Now, my next question is, where do we see UDL in everyday life? So I've got an example here. We have got some automatic sliding doors. These are universally designed for all to be able to enter through that building. Nobody feels like they're having to use a different entrance. No one feels like they're having to use an aid. No one feels like they have a special need to walk through there and have someone support them or someone to open a door. Those doors will open for the elderly person who perhaps needs a stick and is going to go a little bit more slowly. They have a sensor. I've just come in with my big bags of shopping and I don't have any hands-free to open the door. I've got my young baby in a stroller. I've got a child on each arm. Yeah, everybody that enters into those doors can use those doors. They are universally designed for all to access. So really, what I would like you to think about is in our lives now, many aspects are designed so that we can all access, no matter what our ability, what our strengths, what our ways of moving are, what time of our life we're in. I think at the moment we're in a difficult time of life for many, and how can universal design for learning help our students in this particular phase that we're going through right now? So that's something to think about. Any examples that you can think of other than these doors? I'm just going to ask you that as a question. Take a moment to have a think. No, and we don't have to touch the doors when we have. We don't want to touch anything anyway with COVID, do we? Yeah. But where else what other things do we have in our daily lives when we're out and about outside our home, we're moving around when we're allowed to, where we have things that have been designed in this way so that everyone can have easy access?
The open buffet.
Yeah.
it seems someone is hungry.
I'm going straight to the end with the cakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe the engineer who are designing the aircrafts, they need maybe some of these ideas.
Yeah. But think about perhaps, Ali, you and I used to travel through airports.
I know.
Travelators. We would get on a travelator, wouldn't we? Yeah, everyone can access a travelator. But think about maybe, I mean, sort of moving towards a little bit more our students. What about, okay, so there was a trick in here earlier. When I showed you the video with Shelley, I didn't make that universal for all learners. But what could I have done to do that?
Maybe add subtitles, add the sign language in the corner. Yeah.
So I could have given you the link for the clip,
Yeah.
and all of the people who are accessing today could have watched the clip, but watched it with subtitles, perhaps for their mother tongue. They could have paused and rewound the clip so that they could go over specific points. I could have added to that some bullet points that would highlight the most important things that I felt Shelley was saying that I thought you might like to pick up on. What else could we have done?
Transcripts.
Yeah, some scripts. Yep. So just by taking that video, we can make that really very open to all learners. And it's not just because we perhaps Shelley was speaking in Canadian. She has a Canadian accent. I'm English. I've got an English accent, but I still find the accent very difficult. So, you know, we can choose to use subtitles to support our own learning at any point at all. So yeah, transcripts I can see here, providing any sort of personalization opportunities. And thank you for making that point, because what that speaks to is that I have agency over how I want to interact with this material. How do I want to watch this video of Shelley and process that information? Yep.
And I think, Dianne, this brings this whole idea of the online learning and then the synchronous and asynchronous task, because with the asynchronous task, you can provide more option for the student, and then you are sure that they will be able to do it and they will be hopefully successful.
Yep, yep. And I can see here providing handouts.
Yeah.
I mean, even having a short presentation that goes alongside a video. There's all kinds of things that we can do, but very quickly we can make it much more open. So showing the video at the beginning like that is kind of a way of opening up that conversation. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So there's a little bit of science behind UDL, and I am a visual arts specialist. I am not a scientist. I do not propose to be a scientist, but I do understand that we have 3 primary brain networks. Each one is unique, and we have diverse skills, needs, and interests. And neuroscience reveals that these differences are as varied and unique as DNA or our fingerprints. So we have the recognition network, which is the what of learning. We have the strategic network, which is the how of learning. And we have the affective network, which is the why of learning. And universal design for learning works in these 3 different areas. So we think about the recognition is how we gather facts, how we categorize, how we see, hear, and read. So providing different strategies for these areas gives multiple opportunities for students to engage with the material. The same for the how of learning, their strategic network, planning and performing tasks, how we organise and express our ideas, allowing students to have multiple ways to express their ideas, allows again for them to engage with the learning and to respond to a task in ways that work well for them. And finally, the third network is the affective network, and how learners get motivated but stay motivated. And we can see through universal design for learning the indicators that they have build up on that student confidence and that motivation, so that as students go through the layers of developing their skills in universal design for learning, we can see that they become more deep thinkers, more cognitive, and it allows students to explore new avenues as they develop. So I want to take a moment to just think about this variability of a student that we mentioned earlier. Think about your students. What are some of the variables that your students have? Have they changed since students went more into a remote learning environment? Can you throw into the chat for me some of those variables that you might think of in your own context? Link it back to the students that you're working with right now. What are some of those variables?
So waiting for some of these ideas in the chat, I would like to check that we're having some question coming also in the Q&A that I'm going to keep for the end of the session. And Dianne, while the people are thinking about the students, do you have any recommendation about a book that if we would like to know more about UDL that you really recommend, or an author?
Yeah. Guys, this is not a secret. This is not something I'm keeping to myself. Please go to CAST, CAST.org. Maybe you can pop that on the chat there, Ali. But
Yes.
go to cast.org. There you will find so many resources. There's little workshops, there's strategies, there's posters you can download. There's lots and lots of information and support for all educators everywhere on cast.org. We'll go to the site at the end of this webinar if we've got some time. Gosh, we're running out of time. I can see that.
we still have around 20 minutes.
Yeah. So cast.org, they have lots of free downloadable resources. They also have lots of courses that you can do. If your school can put you forward for a course, and there's some short courses that really will help you to engage with this as a strategy for your inclusive classrooms. Thank you, Ali. Cast.org. So variability of a student. Has anyone thought about some of those variables?
They didn't, so maybe they are tired.
They didn't. No. Okay. All right. Well, I've got on the slide here two different pictures. Now, one of them is, it looks like a car seat, doesn't it? Sort of thing that
the questions are increasing, Dianne.
Oh,
so people
okay.
are.
Shall I wait or shall I move on?
No,
I'll wait a little
continue.
bit. So yeah, we'll think about the variability of the student, because what I'm talking about now is going to help to speak to that.
So do you want me to share a question?
Yeah, well, just or the variability of a student. Has anyone commented on what are some of the variables?
Okay, so okay, so it's a comment. It's a comment. The name is a little bit difficult, so I'm not going to pronounce it in a bad way. And then I'm a teacher with a kind of a MYP coordinator who studied cognitive science. I always question, nobody learns the same way, so why do we teach the same way?
Yeah. And do you know, I don't know if you all think along the same lines, but at the moment we've been through, or we are still going through, a massive change to education, and education hasn't really changed in the tools and the way we are delivering our classes for a very, very, very long time. And I am hoping that some of the things that we've had to embrace in our online environments, and some of the tools and the digital tools, or the more physical tools, we will take into our new classrooms when we have either physical or blended classrooms in the future. So I do think there's a lot to think about the way that we're moving forward and being able to embrace more learners. Okay, I'm going to speak.
So we're ready to continue, okay. Dianne.
Yeah, I'm going to speak a little bit to this picture then. Whoops, we've gone forward too much. All right, so here we've got another way to think about how we're approaching our students. So if we provide just one way to sit, what will happen to me if I'm sitting on that chair for any time at all? I can tell you right now, after about 5 minutes, I'll start to get quite a sore back. But it's not fitting me, is it? It's not going to fit me as someone who's sitting down in the most comfortable way. Now, the picture on the left is a car seat. And none of us nowadays would think of getting into a car to drive safely without adjusting that seat so that it fits us, so that we can do the task of driving as best we can. So this is where we think about the variability of our learners. How can we meet those different variables that our learners have? And this car seat demonstrates that beautifully, because we might need to adjust the height, the rank, we might need to support the back, we might need to move the seat forward, we might need to have a little bit of a rest and support, we might need some support around here to be able to engage and to drive that car as safely as possible. But if we put something which was very rigid, which couldn't move into that car, we wouldn't be able to drive that car safely. Maybe one person might be able to out of 100. I don't know what the statistics would be. But when we think about the variability of the learner, we're thinking about meeting all of our learners and the differences that they have.
So we got visual impairment, we've got like biological variables, we got things related to the brain. So all these came up in the chat or in the Q&A.
Yeah.
And then some people, they started sharing also the link of cast.org, but then Christina, can you please do it by sending it to all panelists and attendees so everyone also can check your message, because this is coming only to me and to Dianne.
Yeah. So Christina has shared the UDL guidelines, cast.org, and on there are lots and lots of resources. There's lots to download, as I said earlier.
So I have a question here, Dianne, before we continue. I know we still have less than 15 minutes, but then Marcella is saying, this is great, but what about the school with limited budget? Okay. So if I want just to directly jump in, I would say, like, it's not about the budget. It's really about how we are looking at our students, right, Dianne? So.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there is some thinking out there that when we talk about universal design for learning, we're talking about offering tools like this. We're offering computers, we're offering iPads, but actually it's not about that. It's about offering multiple strategies and allowing our students to engage in different ways. So not just offering a handout, but offering perhaps text that's in a different color, or just multiple
or bigger size. You know, sometimes you print on an A3 instead of an A4.
Yeah. And why ever not? Why not have the posters, the pictures up, the posters up? Why not think about adding just some visuals to some text that will help to prompt? It may take a little bit more time in the beginning, but as I said, if you think about it as having a backpack with lots of great tools in, we just start to drop those tools in when we're doing anything in our planning that we know will meet many of our learners.
Last month, I was visiting Diana classroom, and then it's the idea of having a flexible classroom, even though the classroom was not full with this like amazing equipment, but then the teacher had 2 students sitting outside, and then it was a sunny day. And then when we came and we talked to the students, like, why you decided to sit outside? They said, like, it's more fresh, it's more relaxing. And then the other people stayed inside. It's also by changing little habits and then not having the fear of the change, because now the key word of our session today is the change. And then when I put this idea in front of other teachers, they were like, no, like they will not be controlled. But who said that they need to be controlled? You know, like if they are really engaged in the activity, and you gave them that choice, they will do it outside, inside, even without having a control on them.
Yeah, and I've just seen what Mona said, which is exactly, I agree with you so much, Mona. It's giving students the ownership. If you say to your students, how would you like to learn? What materials would you like to use? Where would you like to sit? Would you like to sit outside where it's quiet, or would you like to sit on the carpet down here? If you allow them that choice, they are far more likely to engage. And
Christina, Christina is talking more about now the limited time and not just the budget, the money. But you're right, because again, when we're talking about these new schools or a new way of working, it's all about collaboration. And so if we are able to embed collaboration in our weekly plans as a part of the healthy routine of the school, you will start seeing that if I prepare this, I can share it with this teacher, with the upper grade level, with the lower grade level, and then we exchange. And look now to this like beautiful webinar where we have people from all the planet. If everyone decided to stay in touch and then to connect, you don't need to create everything from zero, right, Dianne?
No, absolutely. And I think that's what we think we need to do, because we're used to working in a school and being very independent. And when I talk about some of the great things about having to work in the new online way, it's these connections that we have, my goodness. I mean, I thought I connected quite a bit, but I'm connecting with educators all over the world, and we don't need to, as we say, reinvent the wheel constantly. We can just build on each other's practice. There's some great Facebook groups and social media groups out there that are sharing great practice right now. And I think what we need to do is come to it with generosity. True. And without fear, and not be judged. And that's just part of being in a great professional learning community. And there's lots of those that are working in different areas around the world. And I mean, that's the best way I can suggest that we think about this. But you can have your own professional learning community in your own school. If 2 or 3 of you decide that you would like to start experimenting and developing some strategies for universal design for learning, try two strategies each, and implement them and see how they go. And if they go well, then you can all add those to your toolbox, and then you can try another couple. As I said, just do it bit by bit. Become more confident. Don't expect to do everything all at once. And this is one of my later slides, which we're probably not going to get to. But just making a small change day by day, week by week. It's like any new practice that we do. When we change from being teachers who are used to having a textbook and doing chalk and talk to becoming inquiry-based teachers, it's a big change, but we just do it piece by piece and support our students on that journey. And finally we get there and we have the confidence to be able to work in that way.
Agila is asking, is play considered as UDL?
I think so, yeah. I hear teachers say, but I'm worried when someone walks past the classroom. What if my head of school walks past and thinks that there's chaos and there's noise? I tell you, that's the best learning environment. Your students are engaged, they're having fun, they're going home and saying, but today we did. This is what I learned. This is what I tried. I didn't do so well with this, but I tried this and this worked. So having that ability to choose their own strategies, if we have choice and it's not imposed upon us, we are more likely to engage in what we're doing. I really believe.
Okay, I'm finding the questions are very attractive, so I'm going for another question, Dianne. Inputs, please. What are the possible barriers we as teachers can anticipate to applying UDL? Will it be the time, the resources, the training, all of them? So what do you think, Dianne?
Okay, I think there may likely be many barriers, but many of those barriers are those that we perceive may be there. So time is a barrier, for sure it is. But what I'm suggesting is that we do this piece by piece. We don't try and do it immediately all at once. And that incremental change will just build. Budget. I don't believe that there's a great need for any budgetary requirements. You may want to invest in some training through CAS.org or me. There's many opportunities, but you may want to invest in some training so that you can have a bigger impact in your school. That can be done in a variety of ways. But I think the main thing is that as educators, if we have the passion and we can see the benefit for all of our learners, that is enough to drive us through whatever barriers may be there. So it's about the will and the collect of the people in your school, and actually ensuring that everyone comes on the journey with you.
Good, Dianne. The next 5 more minutes. So if you want to start wrapping up, or take us to your final slide, where it's up to you. So.
Where are we? We've got variability. We've touched on that a little bit. Yeah, so our barriers, thinking about physical obstacles, our school context, the resources. What about policies? I mean, our assessment policy, for example, or our language policy, do they allow for all learners to be able to engage with agency in the ways that they would like
Whenever, Dianne, I go to some, again, schools or do some workshops, and I say, in the lower classes, if English is the language of instruction, and then, I'm in the Gulf or in the area here in the Middle East, and I tell them, let them also speak in Arabic if needed. And then I get the, no, only in English. And then I say, it doesn't work like that. Okay, no. Maybe we've been raised like this, English class, only English, Arabic class, only Arabic, and same same for maybe other languages, but again, the research, neuroscience is showing that the more connection between languages, we will have less barriers regarding the learning.
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree. We have also barriers in our own context, barriers that we bring ourselves. And I always ask educators to reflect on the type of learner that you are, because you will generally connect with your students in that way, but perhaps your students won't be able to connect with you that way. So I'm a very visual learner, but not all of my students might be visual learners too. So thinking about our own context and how we like to learn is really important. I can see Ali's reading another question there, so
I'm reading a full paragraph, but I wish also if Christina can put it in the Q&A, so I can read it in a nicer way. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to give you just this is just a quick overview of, we talked about the multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression, and this is the main framework for universal design for learning. So I invite you to go to the website and invest further in it. But these are the different areas. So engagement, we've got recruiting interest, sustaining effort, and self-regulation. Representation, we've got perception, language and symbols, and comprehension, and these are all categories that have got lots of strategies within them. And action and expression, physical action, communication, and our executive functions. And this is what it looks like when you go to the website, and this is a downloadable resource that you can look at, and you can actually pick up different elements of this as I say, your toolbox to choose with your students. Here we've got some examples of UDL, some of the barriers that might exist in learning, and the UDL solution. So for example, a textbook chapter requires students to see, decode, comprehend, and process the visual information. And as our colleagues, our participants have said here, allowing digital text perhaps, because this can be easily converted to speech. Just being able to put something onto a screen, it's not always an opportunity, but being able to put something onto a screen and look at digital text, we can then listen to it, pause it, etc. The next one here is lectures. Yeah, this is a good one. I mean, there are times, no matter what our classroom is like, where we need to give some direct instruction, but it needs students to identify key points, process the oral information, possibly in their second or third language, be physically or cognitively able to take notes, and be present. But the UDL solution would be thinking about slides, thinking about scaffolding for those students who have perhaps more difficulty taking notes, identifying the key points, making some oral footnotes, for example. There's all kinds of things that we can do just to break down those simple things that we probably do on a daily basis and don't really think about what those barriers may be. So as I said earlier, it may be possible for you to incorporate all of the principles at the same time. It might just be that you pick and choose the things which you feel are most appropriate. But what I'd encourage you to do is just start slowly. Start with something that you feel that you can manage, that you can work with and process, that isn't going to be too time dependent for you, and that's going to allow you a strategy to embed straight away and just start to build slowly but surely.
So before we wrap it up, I would like from Dianne to stop sharing her screen, and then I'm going to do the following, if you don't mind. I'm going to share your website. So for all the people who would like to know more about Dianne, her work, what she's offering, there's plenty of questions, Dianne, but it's really the end of the session. So you can go on her website. I'm going to put it in the chat for you. And so you can check the upcoming event, the virtual workshop that she's offering. I would like to remind you that our YouTube channel will have this discussion. And then as you can see, we have the 4 morning sessions. They are already here, the Arabic session, and we started adding the English session. So the Dianne session will be maximum by the end of the day today or tomorrow morning.
Right.
And then if you still have energy, we have one more session in half an hour from now. We will be doing a mindfulness session online. The first part of the session will be about the importance of mindfulness, and then we will take you through an experience online. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope you enjoyed the day. Dianne, it was great listening to you, learning from you this afternoon. And then these are all the website, YouTube channel in the chat. Feel free to stay connected and check our Facebook page and join our YouTube channel. It's always great to have you all on board. And let me announce, I didn't say it in the morning, so this is a kind of a scoop. Put it on your agenda. 20 March, a special day on leadership. I'm bringing leaders from all around the planet to talk about different aspects of leadership in Arabic and in English as usual. So stay connected, half an hour break, and then join me for the last session of the day, the mindfulness one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much. I hope to see you again somewhere, sometime.
Yes. Bye-bye.